"Never interrupt me again," yelled the boss to the new employee. Then she did this. Michael Thompson's shout echoed throughout the 12th floor of the financial consulting firm when his new secretary tried to alert him about an urgent call. Jennifer Wilson ran out in tears but returned the next day with a different determination in her eyes. It was in that tense moment that everything began. Michael had just lost his patience when Jennifer knocked on his office door for the 3rd time that morning. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but there's a very important call on line 2 and—" "Never interrupt me again," he bellowed, standing up so forcefully his chair nearly toppled over. "Don't you understand that when I'm working, no one can disturb me, no one?" Jennifer's face burned with shame. Every employee on the floor stopped what they were doing to stare. The silence that followed was deafening. I just wanted to let you know that—" "I don't care," Michael pointed his finger at her. "The next time you walk into this office uninvited, you can go home and never come back. Understood?" Jennifer nodded, tears streaming down her face. She left the room under the pitying gazes of her co-workers and locked herself in the bathroom to cry. The next day, Jennifer arrived at the office earlier than usual. She had spent the whole night thinking about her boss's words. When Michael arrived, she greeted him politely, but something in her eyes had changed. The first important call came around 10 in the morning. It was Richard Anderson, one of the firm's biggest clients, desperate to speak with Michael about an urgent investment issue. "Mr. Thompson is in a meeting and cannot be interrupted," Jennifer said calmly into the phone, even though she could see Michael alone in his office, browsing the computer. "But it's urgent. I need to speak with him now," Richard insisted. "I'm sorry, but I can't interrupt him. Would you like me to take a message?" Richard hung up angrily. Jennifer wrote everything down in her notebook and continued working. At 11:30, a call came from Michael's mother, Mrs. Barbara, a 68-year-old woman who always called her son when she felt lonely. "Could you get Michael, dear? I really need to speak with him," the elderly woman's trembling voice pleaded. Jennifer glanced at Michael's office, where he was drinking coffee and scrolling online. "He's busy and can't be interrupted, Mrs. Barbara. Would you like me to take a message?" "But dear, I'm his mother. I'm sorry, but those are his orders. I can't interrupt him for anything." Mrs. Barbara hung up sadly, leaving Jennifer with a heavy conscience. But an order was an order. During lunch, the employees gathered in the break room to discuss the situation. David, the accountant, shook his head disapprovingly. "Michael went too far yesterday. Jennifer was just trying to do her job. But did you hear how he yelled at her?" Michelle from sales remarked. "It was so humiliating." "She's different today," observed Susan, the senior receptionist. "More serious, more distant." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That afternoon, Michael finally left his office and asked Jennifer about the calls. "Did anyone call for me today?" "Yes, sir. Mr. Richard Anderson called at 10 about an urgent investment issue. Your mother called at 11:30, saying she needed to speak with you. And your wife called a little while ago asking if you'd forgotten that today is your mother-in-law's birthday." Michael stopped walking. Richard was his biggest client, and his mother only called when something was wrong. And his mother-in-law's birthday? Why didn't you tell me about these calls? Jennifer looked at him with a neutral expression. "You said yesterday that I should never interrupt you again. I'm just following your orders." Michael felt a shiver down his spine. He had indeed said that, but it wasn't what he meant. Or was it? "But those calls were important." "All calls are important to the person calling, Mr. Thompson. How was I supposed to know which ones you'd consider important enough to be interrupted?" Michael didn't know how to respond. He picked up the phone and called Richard back, but it was already too late. The client had transferred his account to another consultant. That night, Michael came home and found his wife, Sarah, with a far from friendly expression. "Michael, you completely forgot about my mother's birthday, didn't you?" "Sarah, I had a rough day at work. Your secretary said I called, but that you couldn't be interrupted. My mother was very hurt. She made a special dinner and you didn't even show up." Michael sank heavily onto the couch. The day had been a complete disaster. The next day, things got worse. Jennifer arrived at work with the same professional but distant demeanor. At 9 in the morning, the phone rang. "Thompson Consulting, good morning," Jennifer answered. "Hello, is this Michael Thompson's company?" asked a nervous male voice. "I need to speak with him urgently. There's been an issue with the banking system, and some investments may be at risk." "Mr. Thompson can't be interrupted right now. May I take a message?" "No, you don't understand. This involves a lot of clients' money. I need to speak with him now." "I'm sorry, but I can't interrupt him. Those are his orders." The man hung up and called the clients directly, warning them about the problem. Many were furious to learn Michael wasn't available to handle the situation. At 10:30, Mrs. Barbara arrived at the office in person. The gray-haired woman with tired eyes approached Jennifer's desk. "Dear, I need to speak with my son. It's about the medical tests I took." Jennifer's heart ached seeing the elderly woman's condition, but she maintained her professional composure. "He's in a meeting and can't be interrupted, Mrs. Barbara." "But I'm his mother, dear, and the tests weren't very good." The woman's words echoed in Jennifer's mind, but she had learned to follow orders. "May I take a message for him?" Mrs. Barbara stood there for a few moments, staring at her son's closed door, then turned and left slowly. Jennifer watched her lean against the hallway wall before entering the elevator. Just then, David passed by the reception and saw what happened. "Jennifer, that was Michael's mother. Why didn't you tell him?" "He can't be interrupted," she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. David knocked on Michael's door without hesitation. "Michael, your mother was here and needed to speak with you." "My mother? When?" "Just now. She said something about medical tests." Michael rushed out after his mother, but she was already gone. He stormed back to Jennifer. "Why didn't you tell me my mother was here?" "You said you didn't want to be interrupted for anything." "But she's my mother." "You didn't specify exceptions when you gave the order, Mr. Thompson." Michael realized he was trapped in a situation of his own making. He couldn't blame Jennifer for doing exactly as he'd instructed. At lunch, the tension in the office was palpable. Employees began taking sides. Some thought Jennifer was being vindictive, while others argued she was just following the boss's orders. "She's right," Susan said to the group in the break room. "He humiliated her in front of everyone. Now he's reaping what he sowed." "But his mother was sick," Michelle countered. "That's different." "How was she supposed to know?" David shot back. Michael was very clear. Never interrupt again. Never again means never again. In the afternoon, the situation reached its limit. Michael had an important presentation for new investors at 3 o'clock. At 10 to 3, his computer completely froze. He tried everything but couldn't access the presentation files. Jennifer was at the reception desk, organizing papers, when she saw Michael panicking in his office. She knew there was a backup of all the files on her computer, something she always did as a precaution. But he couldn't be interrupted. At 3 sharp, the investors arrived. Michael had to improvise the presentation without the important graphs and data. It was a complete disaster. The investors left suspicious and dissatisfied. "Jennifer," Michael called her after the men had left. "Didn't you have a backup of the files?" "Yes, sir." "Why didn't you tell me when you saw I was having trouble?" "You were working. You couldn't be interrupted." Michael sat in his chair and buried his head in his hands. He was losing clients, losing opportunities, and his mother was sick. That night, Michael called his mother as soon as he got home. "Mom, I heard you stopped by the office today. About the tests." "Son," Mrs. Barbara's voice was weak, "the doctors found something with my heart. Nothing too serious, but I need special care. I wanted to talk to you, but your secretary said you couldn't be interrupted." "Mom, I didn't know that." "It's okay, Michael. I know you're very busy. I'll take care of myself, like I always have." Michael hung up the phone with a heavy heart. Sarah watched him from the kitchen. "What's wrong?" "My mother is sick and I didn't even know because..." He stopped mid-sentence. How could he explain he'd created a situation where even his own mother couldn't speak to him? The next day, Michael arrived at the office with a new determination. He'd called Jennifer into his office and clarify the situation, but before he could do that, he got a call from his partner, Dr. Williams, who was traveling. "Michael, I've heard we lost the Augusto Mendez account and that yesterday's presentation was a fiasco. What's going on there?" "Some misunderstandings, Doctor. I'll fix it. Misunderstandings. Words going around town that you've become unreachable, that not even your own mother can talk to you. That's not good for our image. Michael realized the situation had spiraled out of control. He called Jennifer into his office. "Jennifer, we need to talk about..." She entered and stood by the door, waiting. "Have a seat, please." "I'd rather stand, Mr. Thompson. What do you need?" "About the calls. I might have been too strict about not being interrupted. You were very clear in your instructions. But there are exceptions." "What would those exceptions be?" Jennifer pulled a small notebook from her pocket. "I can write them down to avoid further misunderstandings." Michael was speechless. How could he define when a call was important enough to warrant interruption? Calls from my family, important clients, emergencies. And how would I know what counts as an emergency? And which clients are important? Everyone says it's urgent when they call. Michael realized there was no simple answer. Any criteria he set would be subjective and cause conflicts. "Jennifer, I think I went too far the other day. You were just doing your job." "Now I'm doing my job too, Mr. Thompson, following your orders exactly as you asked." There was something in her voice Michael couldn't decipher. It wasn't anger, it wasn't revenge, it was just compliance. The following week, the situation became unbearable. Michael had lost 3 important clients, his mother was avoiding speaking to him, and his wife was furious because he missed a crucial doctor's appointment she had scheduled. That's when Sarah showed up at the office, something that rarely happened. Jennifer greeted her politely. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. He's in a meeting and can't be interrupted." "Jennifer," Sarah said with a smile, "could you call him, please? I'm his wife." "I'm sorry, but he gave very clear orders not to be interrupted by anyone." Sarah was stunned. She had known Jennifer for 2 years, ever since the young woman started working there. They had always been cordial, but now there was a coldness in the secretary's voice. "Jennifer, what's going on here?" "I'm just following my boss's orders, ma'am." At that moment, David walked by the hallway and greeted Sarah. "Mrs. Sarah, good to see you. Is Michael in his office?" "He is, but Jennifer says he can't be interrupted." David looked at Jennifer with a concerned expression. "Jennifer, she's Michael's wife." "I know who she is, David, but the orders were clear." David knocked on Michael's door and entered. "Michael, your wife is here." "Sarah." Michael immediately stepped out of the room. "Honey, why didn't you come in? Your secretary said you couldn't be interrupted." Michael looked at Jennifer, who kept typing on her computer, as if nothing had happened. "Jennifer, she's my wife." "You didn't mention exceptions for family members when you gave the order, Mr. Thompson." Sarah glanced from her husband to the secretary, trying to make sense of the situation. "What order was that?" Michael flushed. How could he explain to his wife that he had created a situation where even she couldn't speak to him? "It was a misunderstanding about work hours." Sarah wasn't foolish. She sensed there was more to the story than Michael was letting on. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" she asked Jennifer. "Of course, Mrs. Thompson." The two stepped aside to a corner of the reception area. "Jennifer, can you tell me what really happened?" Jennifer hesitated for a moment, then told her everything. Michael's shouting, the humiliation in front of everyone, the order to never interrupt him again. Sarah was shocked. She knew her husband's temper, but she never imagined he would go that far. "And you decided to do exactly what he told you?" "It's my job to follow my boss's orders. But Jennifer, you know this is hurting him, don't you?" "It's not my place to question orders, Mrs. Thompson. If he wanted me to interrupt him, he shouldn't have said otherwise." Sarah returned to Michael with a serious expression. "We need to talk at home tonight." After Sarah left, Michael kept thinking about the conversation. For the first time, he began to understand what Jennifer was doing. She wasn't being vengeful or cruel. She was being literal. He had given an absolute order, and she was following it absolutely. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. That night, Sarah got straight to the point. "Michael, you need to tell me what really happened with Jennifer." "I already told you the truth, Michael." He sighed and told her everything. The shouting, the humiliation, the words he had said. Michael, how could you? Jennifer is a good person. She's always helping everyone in the office. She's dedicated, competent. I know, but she kept interrupting me and I was stressed. That doesn't justify humiliating her in front of everyone. Sarah stayed quiet for a few minutes, processing the information. You realize she's teaching you a lesson, don't you? What do you mean? She's showing you how impossible it is to work with absolute orders. How frustrating it is not to be able to use common sense. Michael began to understand. Jennifer wasn't getting back at him. She was teaching him. The next day, Michael arrived early at the office and found Jennifer already working. He watched her for a few minutes. She had always been an exemplary employee, always anticipating problems, always having solutions ready, always treating everyone with kindness and respect. Jennifer, he approached her desk. Can I talk to you? Of course, Mr. Thompson. I'd like to apologize for what happened last week. I was stressed, but that doesn't justify how I spoke to you. Jennifer stopped typing and looked at him. Thank you for the apology, sir. And about the phone calls, you can start letting me know again when important calls come in. As I said before, Mr. Thompson, every call is important to the person calling. How am I supposed to know which ones you consider important? Michael realized she was right. It was his responsibility to set priorities, not hers. You're right. How about this? You let me know about all calls and I'll decide if it's the right time to answer or not. If I say I can't take it, you take a message and I'll call back later. That sounds reasonable. And Jennifer, if it's a family or health emergency, you can interrupt me anytime. Understood, Mr. Thompson. But Michael noticed things didn't go back to normal right away. Jennifer remained polite, but there was a distance that hadn't been there before. She did her job perfectly, but without the proactiveness and warmth she'd once shown. At lunch, Michael spoke with the other employees. Everyone, I'd like to talk about what happened last week. They stopped eating and looked at him. I behaved inappropriately with Jennifer. I yelled at her, humiliated her in front of you all, and that was wrong. Michael, David said, we've all lost our temper at some point. What matters is acknowledging the mistake. But I need your help. Jennifer is different, more distant. I understand why, but I don't know how to make things right again. She's hurt, Susan said, and not just because of the yelling. It's the public humiliation. We all saw it. We all know she didn't deserve that. I already apologized. You apologized in private, Michelle pointed out, but the humiliation was public. Michael got the message. That afternoon, he gathered all the employees in the meeting room. Everyone, I've called you here to make a public apology to Jennifer. Jennifer looked up, surprised. Last week, I behaved inappropriately and disrespectfully toward her. I yelled, I humiliated her in front of all of you, and that was unacceptable. Jennifer, he turned to her, I sincerely apologize. You're an exemplary employee and didn't deserve to be treated that way. The room was completely silent. Jennifer felt her eyes well up. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I accept your apology. And I'd like everyone to know that I'll be making some changes here in the office. We'll have monthly meetings to discuss workplace issues, and anyone can come to me with problems or suggestions. After the meeting, the employees began to see Michael in a new light, and Jennifer, little by little, started to let her guard down. But the real turning point came 2 weeks later, when Jennifer didn't show up for work. She always gave notice if she couldn't come in, so Michael grew worried. Does anyone know anything about Jennifer? He asked Susan. No, she didn't call or text. Michael tried calling her, but her phone was off. By the end of the day, he decided to go to her house to make sure everything was all right. Jennifer lived in a modest neighborhood, in a small but well-kept home. When Michael rang the doorbell, an older woman with red, tearful eyes answered. Are you Jennifer's mother? Yes. Are you her boss? I am. She didn't show up for work today and we were worried. The woman began crying again. My son-in-law, Jennifer's husband, he had a heart attack last night. He's in the ICU. Michael felt a lump in his throat. Oh, I'm so sorry. How is he doing? The doctors don't know if he'll pull through. Jennifer has been at the hospital since yesterday. Can Can I ask which hospital? City General Hospital in the cardiac ICU. Michael thanked her and went straight there. He found Jennifer in the hallway, sitting on a plastic chair, her eyes swollen from crying. Jennifer. She looked up, surprised to see him. Mr. Thompson? What are you doing here? I heard about your husband. How is he? Not well, she said, her voice trembling. The doctors say the next 48 hours are critical. Michael sat beside her. How long have you been married? 6 years. We met in college. College? Yes, I studied business administration. Brian studied engineering. Michael was surprised. Jennifer had a degree in business and was working as a secretary. Why didn't you tell me you had a business degree? You never asked. And when I needed a job, I couldn't afford to be picky. But why work as a secretary if you're qualified for more? Jennifer hesitated before answering. After we graduated, Brian got a good job at an engineering firm. I got pregnant soon after, but I lost the baby in the 5th month. It was hard. I fell into depression and couldn't work for a while. By the time I recovered, the job market was tough, and I needed any job I could get. Michael began to understand the full story. Jennifer wasn't just a secretary. She was a smart, educated woman who had faced significant losses and was fighting to rebuild her life. Brian always supported me, she continued. He said once things got better, I could look for work in my field. But now, she couldn't finish and started crying again. Jennifer, don't worry about work right now. Focus on your husband. Your job is secure. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. But I don't know how we'll cover the extra medical costs. Insurance covers the basics, but he'll need expensive medication, physical therapy. Michael thought for a moment. Then he said, Jennifer, I'd like to help with the medical expenses. I can't accept. It's not charity, it's fairness. You're a valuable employee and the company should support you in tough times. Jennifer looked at him gratefully but still hesitated. I'll pay you back as soon as I can. No need. Consider it a company benefit. Just then, a doctor approached. Family of Brian Wilson? That's me, Jennifer said, standing quickly. His condition has stabilized. He's still serious, but out of immediate danger. Jennifer broke into tears of relief. Michael placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Over the next few days, Michael visited the hospital daily. He met Brian, a kind and intelligent young man who worked as an engineer at a small firm. He saw how much Jennifer loved him and how they supported each other. Brian, Michael said during one visit, once you recover, I'd like to talk to you about some projects at my company. We always need good engineers. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Jennifer speaks very highly of you. Michael was surprised. Even after what happened? She told me about your disagreement, but she said you're a good boss and learned from the mistake. That's rare these days. 2 weeks later, Brian was discharged from the hospital. Michael organized a small office party to celebrate his recovery. It was the first time all the employees had seen Jennifer genuinely smile since the incident. Everyone, Michael said at the party, I'd like to make an announcement. We're creating a new position in the company, Human Resources Manager, and I'd like to offer this position to Jennifer. Everyone applauded. Jennifer was speechless. Mr. Thompson, I don't know what to say. Say you accept. You have the education for it, practical experience dealing with people, and you've shown you know how to resolve conflicts intelligently. But I've never worked in HR before, and I'd never had to publicly apologize to an employee before. We all learn new things. Jennifer accepted the promotion with tears in her eyes. In the following months, she transformed the workplace. She implemented clear communication policies, created a channel for reporting harassment, and organized training on workplace respect. The company began to be recognized in the city as a great place to work. Other business owners approached Michael to ask how he'd created such a harmonious environment. The secret, Michael always said, is admitting when you're wrong and learning from the people you lead. Brian fully recovered and began working as a consulting engineer for Michael's company. The two couples became close friends. A year after the incident, Michael organized a gathering to celebrate the company's anniversary. In his speech, he made sure to tell the whole story. A year ago, I made a serious mistake. I humiliated an employee because I was stressed and thought my authority gave me the right to treat people poorly. Jennifer could have simply quit or sued the company. Instead, she taught me a life lesson I'll never forget. He looked at Jennifer, who was seated with Brian. She showed me that authority without respect is tyranny, that absolute orders are impossible to follow, and that true leadership comes from example, not shouting. Jennifer, Michael continued, thank you for not giving up on me when I deserved it. Thank you for teaching me to be a better boss, a better husband, and a better person. Jennifer stood and walked to the microphone. Mr. Thompson. Michael, she corrected, since they were now management colleagues. When you yelled at me that day, I left furious and humiliated. I thought about quitting, suing the company, even revenge. But when I got home and told Brian, he said something that changed my perspective. He said, Jennifer, hurt people hurt people. Maybe Michael is going through something hard and took it out on you. The question is, will you perpetuate this cycle of pain or break it? I decided to break it, not by being submissive or passive, but by being firm and instructive, showing the consequences of your choices without being cruel or vengeful. She gestured to the room. And look where we are now, a company where people want to work, where conflicts are resolved through dialogue, where everyone feels respected. Thank you, Michael, for having the humility to admit your mistake and the courage to change. And thank you all for supporting this transformation. The applause was thunderous. Many employees were moved, including some who had witnessed the original scene. After the party, Michael and Sarah were leaving when they ran into Jennifer and Brian in the parking lot. Jennifer, Sarah said, I never properly thanked you. Thanked me for what? For saving my marriage. Jennifer looked confused. What do you mean? When Michael came home after yelling at employees, he would arrive stressed, irritated, bringing that negative energy. It affected our relationship, our family. When he learned to communicate better at work, it completely changed his behavior at home too. Michael confirmed with a nod. It's true. Learning to respect my employees taught me to respect my family better too. You two, said Brian, are an example of how people can grow together, even after conflict. That's inspiring. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 6 months later, the company won a regional award for Best Workplace. Michael was invited to give a lecture on leadership at a local university. Young people, he said to the business students, you'll hear a lot about leadership techniques, business strategies, ways to increase productivity. But I want to talk about something more basic, how to treat people with dignity. 2 years ago, I thought being a boss meant people had to obey me without question. I believed my authority came from my position, from my power to fire or promote. An employee taught me that real authority comes from the respect you earn, not the fear you impose. And respect is a two-way street. You only receive it if you give it. The story I'm going to tell you started with a shout and a humiliation, but ended with learning and mutual growth. Because when two people are willing to learn from each other, it doesn't matter where they started. What matters is where they end up together. Michael told the full story to the students. Many asked questions about how to implement similar changes in their future companies. Professor, a young woman asked, do you think Jennifer planned from the beginning to teach you that lesson? Good question. I've talked to her about it. She said that at first, when she left the room crying, she just wanted to do exactly what I ordered to show me how impossible it was. But later, when she saw the results, she realized she could use that situation to educate not just me, but to improve the environment for everyone. So, a young man said, she turned a negative situation into an opportunity for growth for everyone. Exactly. And that's a skill you all need to develop, how to turn conflicts into learning opportunities. After the lecture, Michael returned home and found Sarah reading an email on the computer. What is it? An email from Jennifer. She's pregnant. Michael was moved. He knew how much Jennifer and Brian had wanted children after the loss they'd suffered. The next day, Michael called Jennifer into his office. I heard the news. Congratulations. Thank you, Michael. We're so happy. And about maternity leave, you know the company will offer more time than legally required, right? Thank you, but you don't have to. Jennifer, after everything you've done for this company, for me, for all of us, it's the least we can do. Actually, Jennifer said, I wanted to talk to you about the future. With the baby coming, I'm thinking about working part-time for a while. Of course, we'll adjust that. You can arrange your schedule however works best for you. And I've also been thinking about studying organizational psychology more. I think I can help the company even more in that area. You want to pursue a graduate degree? Yes? And I was wondering if the company could help with the costs. Jennifer, of course. In fact, I'd like to propose something more. How about we partner with the university? You take the course, apply the knowledge here at the company, and we become a case study for other students. That would be amazing. And that's how Michael's company became a laboratory for best practices in human resources. Students from various universities visited the firm to understand how the cultural transformation had been achieved. Jennifer became a recognized speaker in the field of workplace conflict resolution. Her story with Michael turned into a case study in several business schools. What impresses me the most, she would say in her talks, is that it all started with a moment of anger and humiliation. But when two people are open to growth, even the worst moments can become opportunities for transformation. The lesson isn't that we should accept being humiliated or mistreated. The lesson is that we can choose how to respond to these situations. We can react with more anger and perpetuate the cycle, or we can respond intelligently and constructively, breaking the cycle and creating something better. Michael always watched her speeches with pride. One day, after a particularly moving presentation, he approached her. Jennifer, I have a proposal for you. What is it? How about we start a human resources consulting firm, you and me as partners? We can help other companies transform their organizational culture. Jennifer thought for a moment. It's an interesting idea, but I'd have one condition. What? That every company we help must implement a psychological support program for employees. Many workplace conflicts stem from unresolved personal issues. Perfect. And we could also create a mentorship system where experienced employees guide newcomers not just technically, but also in personal development. The consulting firm Thompson & Wilson Human Development launched 2 years later. It quickly became a regional benchmark, helping dozens of companies improve their work environments. Their first client was a company whose owner had met Michael at a talk and said, I want to do for my company what you did for yours. What's the main problem in your company? Jennifer asked during their first meeting. Lack of communication. People don't come to me with problems until it's too late. Interesting, Michael said. Have you ever stopped to think why they don't speak up? Honestly, no. Then let's start there, Jennifer replied. You need to understand that effective communication isn't just about talking. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe to speak. They spent 3 months working with that company. They organized group activities, communication training, and implemented a constructive feedback system. The results were astounding. Productivity rose by 30%, employee turnover dropped to nearly zero, and the company began attracting top talent from the region. How did you achieve this transformation? The owner asked. Truthfully, Michael said, you did. We just showed the way. The real change came from you. Organizational transformation, Jennifer explained, doesn't happen from the outside in. It happens when people within the organization decide they want something better and commit to doing their part. With the consulting firm's success, Michael and Jennifer began receiving invitations to speak in other cities. They always shared their story as proof that conflicts can be turned into opportunities. During one of these trips, they were invited to a local TV program. The two of you are a fascinating example, the host said. A relationship that began with conflict and turned into a successful partnership. What was the pivotal moment in that transformation? I would say, Michael replied, that it was when I understood that leading isn't about giving orders. It's about serving. My role as a boss wasn't to be obeyed. It was to help my team do their best. And for me, Jennifer said, the turning point was when I realized I could choose how to react to the situation. I could react with anger and prolong the conflict, or I could react wisely and turn it into a learning opportunity. Do you think every conflict can be transformed this way? The host asked. Not all, Jennifer answered, but many can, as long as the people involved are willing to step out of their comfort zones and learn something new. What would you say to someone going through a similar situation? First, Michael said, acknowledge your part in the problem. Even if you think you're right, ask yourself, is there something I could have done differently? Second, Jennifer continued, focus on the solution, not the problem. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, think about what could go right from now on. And third, Michael finished, remember that real change takes time. Don't expect immediate results, but be consistent in your effort. After the show, they received hundreds of messages from people who related to the story and wanted help resolving their own workplace conflicts. Jennifer, Michael said on the flight back, I think we've found our life's mission. What? Helping people turn conflicts into opportunities for growth. You know what moves me the most about this whole story? Jennifer said. What? That it all started with you yelling, never interrupt me again, and now we spend all day talking, exchanging ideas, interrupting each other, she laughed. If that's not proof people can change, I don't know what is. Michael laughed too. You're right. And you know what's funny? Today I really value it when someone interrupts me with a good idea or an important observation. I've learned that interruption isn't disrespect, it's collaboration. That's the point, Jennifer said. When you realize the people around you want to help you succeed, not hold you back, everything changes. 5 years after the original incident, Michael's company was chosen as the best place to work in the region for the 3rd year in a row. Their human resources consulting firm was now present in 4 states, and they had written a book on organizational transformation that became a bestseller. At the book launch, titled Never Interrupt Me Again, How to Transform Conflicts into Opportunities, Jennifer gave the opening speech. This book tells a true story of transformation, not just mine and Michael's, but of every employee in our company and every business we've had the privilege to help. The story proves that no matter how bad a conflict is, no matter how deep the hurt, there's always room for growth and reconciliation when people are willing to move from who's right to how can we improve. I dedicate this book to everyone who's ever felt humiliated, disrespected, or mistreated at work. You don't have to accept that situation, but you also don't have to react with anger. There's a third way, the path of smart transformation. And I also dedicate it to every boss and leader who's ever lost their temper and said things they shouldn't have. It's not the mistake that defines you, it's how you choose to learn from it. Michael took the stage to give the closing speech. 6 years ago, I was an authoritarian, stressed-out boss who thought yelling solved problems. Today, I can proudly say I'm a leader who learns from his team every day. That transformation didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process, sometimes painful, but always enriching. And it was only possible because I found people willing to help me grow, even after I didn't deserve that help. Jennifer, he turned to her, thank you for seeing potential in me that I didn't even know I had. Thank you for being patient with my learning process. And thank you for turning the worst moment of my professional career into the starting point for the best period of my life. The story we tell in this book proves that real change is possible, that imperfect people can learn from one another, that conflicts can be transformed into collaboration, and that mutual respect isn't just a desirable goal, it's a practical necessity for the success of any organization. If you're reading this book because you're going through a conflict at work, know that there's a way out. It might not be obvious at first, it might demand more from you than you'd like to give, but it exists. And if you're reading because you're a leader who wants to improve, congratulations for having the humility to admit there's always room to grow. That attitude is the first step toward becoming the kind of boss people respect. Not out of fear, but admiration. The book became a publishing phenomenon. Companies across the country began implementing the methods described. Universities included the case in their business administration and organizational psychology curricula. But what made Michael and Jennifer most proud were the letters they received from everyday people who had applied the principles in their own lives and managed to resolve conflicts that had seemed impossible. One letter in particular left a deep impression. It was from a young woman working in a family business where her father was extremely authoritarian. Reading your book, I realized I could apply the same strategy Jennifer used. I started following every one of my father's orders to the letter, without question. Within 2 weeks, he himself noticed his instructions were contradictory and impossible to fulfill. Today, 3 months later, he consults me before making important decisions, and our relationship has completely improved. Thank you for showing me there's an intelligent way to deal with abusive authority. Jennifer, Michael said after reading the letter, do you realize the impact our story is having on people's lives? It's incredible, isn't it? Who would have thought that awful moment would lead to so much good? You know what this teaches me? That we shouldn't waste our difficult experiences. Every conflict we face can become a source of wisdom to help others. Exactly. And it also teaches me that we shouldn't underestimate our power to positively influence those around us, even in tough situations. Today, 10 years after the original incident, Michael and Jennifer maintain a strong partnership, both professionally and personally. They're close friends, their families meet regularly, and they continue learning from each other. The original company remains a model of a healthy work environment. The consulting firm has expanded to other countries in Latin America, and the book has been translated into 12 languages. But perhaps the greatest legacy of their story is what can't be measured: the number of conflicts resolved constructively because someone was inspired by their example and chose transformation over revenge. Brian, who fully recovered from his heart attack, now works as director of engineering at Michael's company. He and Jennifer have 2 children, a 6-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy. Sarah became an active advocate for workers' rights and often participates in Michael's lectures on responsible leadership. Mrs. Barbara, Michael's mother, fully recovered from her heart problems and became one of her daughter-in-law's biggest fans. Jennifer taught my son to be a better person, she often says proudly. And Michael, he learned that true authority doesn't come from yelling or threats, but from examples and mutual respect. He learned that leading means serving, that real strength is vulnerability, and that the best leaders are those who can turn their own mistakes into opportunities for everyone's growth. In his office, displayed prominently, there's a plaque with a phrase that sums up everything he learned. The best way to never be interrupted by problems is to create an environment where people feel safe to talk about issues before they happen. And Jennifer, she discovered she had a natural talent for turning conflicts into opportunities. She realized her ability to stay calm in tough situations and find creative solutions to complex problems were rare and valuable gifts. Most importantly, she discovered it's possible to maintain dignity and integrity even when mistreated. That there's a difference between being submissive and being strategic, and that sometimes the most powerful way to resist injustice is to show in practice how things could be better. The story of Michael and Jennifer continues to inspire people around the world. Not because it's a perfect story, but because it's a real one. Real about mistakes and successes, pride and humility, conflict and reconciliation. It's a story that proves no matter how bad a moment may be, there's always room for transformation when the people involved are willing to learn from each other. And it's a story that reminds us sometimes the best way to teach someone is to give them exactly what they're asking for, until they realize if it's truly what they want. End of story. Now tell us, what did you think of Michael and Jennifer's transformation? Have you ever faced a similar situation at work? How did you react? Do you believe anyone can change like Michael did? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your experience. Thank you so much for being here, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspiring stories like this one.